Destroy is a great new add-on for Create that focuses on chemistry and adds so much content, it's honestly really impressive. Now the mod is only in beta, but it seems pretty functional from what I've seen so far. I haven't figured everything out, but the mod makes good use of Create's Ponder feature, which helps learning how to use the mod. You'll definitely also want to add a mod like just enough items, which show you all the items added by the mod, including the different chemical compounds that you can make. I won't be able to cover everything the mod adds in this video since there's just so much, but I can show you enough to cover the basics. So here we go. Alright, so above all else, Destroy is a mod about chemistry. So the centerpiece of this mod, I think, is the vat. So the vat is where you can have a lot of reactions take place. There's other ways to have reactions, so you can have distillation, you can have centrifuges, but the vat is the most complex. So let's start off by looking at the vat controller. So we can go into the Ponder by pressing W, and it's going to show us how to make the vat. So you have to build a shell. It has to be out of certain materials, in this case copper casing and glass, and you need to save room for the controller. So there's way more information about how to use vats in the Ponder menu, but now I'll show you how to build one in the game. So you need to use certain materials, but you don't need to limit yourself to copper casing. You can build it out of iron, and it doesn't need to be a certain way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to build, why don't I build a 2x2? So we can put glass, and you kind of want to have glass to see what's going on. But I'll show you that you can also put other things. So I can put some copper on this side and it's still going to work. I could go like this. It doesn't have to be exactly a cube. It doesn't have to be a certain way. So you have a lot of flexibility on how to do it. So right now, if I break this and I put in a vat controller, it should assemble. So this is a functional vat. It might not be pretty, but it's functional. So if I take my wrench and I right click, it shows me a thermometer. And if I click again, it's going to show me the pressure. Now if I do this on top and I right click, it's going to put a vent. So the vents let gas come in and out. And if I put a lever or any redstone signal, I can open and close the vents. Just like that. So I can have open vents and I can have closed vents. You can also pipe material in and out of the vat. So if I put a pipe on the outside, it's automatically going to make a connection to the inside. So you can also attach funnels, and that's going to make a connection to the inside as well. And another thing you can do to vats is add UV lights. Alright, so back to this vat right here. So before we go on, I'm going to show you something very important, and that's the ideal gas law. It's PV equals nRT. So what does that mean? Well, it means that pressure times volume equals the amount of a substance times the ideal gas constant times temperature. So if you have a constant volume, really all you need to know is that as P goes up, T will also go up. So if you heat something, increase the temperature, the pressure will also go up. And if you reduce the temperature, well, the pressure will decrease. So let's demonstrate that right now. So here I have some vents. I'm going to make sure that they are closed. There we go. And I'm going to increase the temperature. So how do I do that? Well, I'll do that by adding some blaze burners. So I'll put some blaze burners down here, and we can see that the vat temperature is 24 degrees. I'll go ahead and feed them some blaze cakes, and we'll see that the temperature is rising. Cool. So now if I right click on here, I can see that the temperature is also rising. And we can also open up these vents, and what that's going to do is it's going to make the pressure fall back to the ambient atmospheric temperature, because now, well, the pressure is equalized because I've opened the vents. And we can also close them back up, and well, our pressure goes back up as well. Alright, so that's how we heat up the vat, but maybe we also want to cool it. So how do we do that? Well, I'll go ahead and get rid of these blaze burners, and I'll introduce you to the refrigerators. So the refrigerators they work the same way as blaze burners. You have to use an empty blaze burner on a stray, which lives in a cold biome, and you have to feed it refrigerant. So unlike real life where refrigerant is not consumed, the refrigerator does consume the refrigerant. So what is refrigerant? Well, it's actually a property of certain chemicals. So if we go into just enough items, we can look at all these chemical components, and they'll tell us information about them. Their mass, their boiling point, their liquid density, but also their effect. So you can have ozone depleters, you can have toxic chemicals, you can have carcinogenic chemicals. There's pollution in this mod. You also have things that produce acid rain. But what we're looking for is a refrigerant. So ammonia is probably the simplest refrigerant to get in the mod. So it's a refrigerant, it's also smelly. How do we get ammonia? Like a lot of things in this mod, there's multiple ways to get it. The simplest way to get ammonia is through distillation. So how do we do it? Well, you have to use urine. It's kind of gross, but it's true. Urine is a source of ammonia. So you can distill your urine using these bubble caps. The bubble caps are used for the distillation, and you get an ammonia solution, which you can use to refrigerate your refrigerators. Okay, there's other ways to do it. You can have reactions with these chemicals, and ammonia is one of the resulting chemicals. Same thing here. There's the Bosch process, which also gives you ammonia. So, how does distillation work? Well, let's get our bottle of urine, put it in this fluid tank, and it's going into our distillation column. So how does distillation work? Well, we're pumping our fluid into this series of bubble caps, which makes a distillation column. It's being heated by a blaze burner, and the result is being pumped into this fluid container. And we can see it says ammonia solution. So the way that distillation works is each product of the distillation goes to a different height. Right now there's only one, but if there were more, they would go to different levels. And we'll see that later as we distill, as we refine oil. Okay, so now it's going in here. We're gonna wait till there's a bit more, and then we're gonna feed it to the refrigerators. We have to pump it in through the bottom of them. So right now our temperature is 24 degrees. You know what, let's go ahead and flick this lever and pump our refrigerant over to the refrigerators. So we're going to see them start to shiver. And when they start shivering, we're going to know that they're active. So now you see they're shivering. So our temperature should be dropping. All right, so the temperature is going down, and we'll see that the vat pressure is also decreasing. So that's how you control the vat's temperature. So I mentioned that this mod adds pollution. They also give you an item called the pollutometer to help you monitor that. So if you right click on it, you can choose what kind of pollution to monitor. So there's greenhouse gases, there's ozone depletion, there's smog level, rain acidity, and radioactivity. I've connected some display links to the pollutometers, but currently no data is being shown, and I think that's because I just haven't polluted yet. So although Destroy focuses on chemistry, it also adds things that enhance the base Create experience. So let's have a look at some of these items. This is the planetary gear set, and it's really just another large cogwheel, but it rotates in the opposite direction. So if you give it a certain rotation direction, it's going to spin in the opposite direction. So you can have more compact builds because you don't have to pass through something like a gearbox just to change the direction of rotation. The next item is the differential. So what does this thing do? Well, we'll notice we have two creative motors, and they're both running at 16 RPM, but the gear's not turning. How does that make any sense? Well, it's in the name, differential. It outputs the difference between the inputs. That's about what it does. But let's say I'll change this to 19. Now it starts spinning. So we have 16 and 19. The difference between that is 3, but it's going to output 1.5. So it actually outputs half the difference between the inputs. The next quality of life improvement is the double cardan shaft, which is really a universal joint. So all this does is it lets you transfer rotation at a 90-degree angle. So before you would have had to use something like an encased chain drive or a gearbox. So this is a more compact way of transferring your rotation by 90 degrees. And it also allows you to not have different inputs interfere with each other. Next, we have the coaxial cogwheel. So this is just a cog that lets you put a shaft through it, also allowing for more compact designs. So the way to do this is you put down a shaft, you put down your coaxial cogwheel, and you put another shaft through it. And it's going to show this little brown thing here. That means that you've made your coaxial cogwheel. So Destroy is the name of the mod. So of course they're going to add some new explosives. So currently they add 5 new explosives: the Anvil block, the cordite, the dynamite, the nitrocellulose, and the picric acid block. So they all do slightly different things, and you can hold shift to see what they do. So I won't go in great detail in all of these because as you can see, the feature is likely to be removed or heavily modified. So I will show you the dynamite block though, which is pretty cool. So what the dynamite does is it lets you set the exact area that you want to explode. So right now you see there's a cube around it, and I can change this. I can click and hold, just like with a lot of things in Create. So you can go from a radius of 0 to 10. So I can say I want it to go 10 blocks out this way. I want it to go 10 blocks downwards, and I want it to go, maybe I want it to go 10 blocks this way. So you see we've defined our area, and to explode it, all you do is you apply a redstone signal. So the dynamite block allows you to excavate a configurable rectangular volume. Alright, so I'll get to the whole oil extraction and refining process in just a bit, but first I want to look at two more items. So the first item is the Swiss Army knife. So what's really cool about it is it chooses the tool that's best for the job. So there's 4 tools that it can choose. So you see I'm looking at oak leaves right now and it chooses the shears. I'm looking at stone, it'll choose a pickaxe. If I look at wood, it'll choose an axe. And if I look at dirt, it's going to choose the shovel. So if I head over to survival, we'll see how this works. There you go. And another cool feature added by the mod is a new music disc. It's orange and it's called Spectrum by Petrol Park. You should definitely check it out. So how does oil work in Destroy? Well, it's not a new fluid. Instead, each chunk has a chance of containing some oil. And we can see this by going into the ponder menu on the pump jack. So you actually have to locate oil using explosives and the handheld seismometer, and it'll tell you if there's oil in that chunk or not. And then if there is, you can put down a pump jack and start pumping the oil. So the oil will just be taken out of that whole chunk. It's abstracted as a property of a chunk. So what I find helpful for this is doing F3 and G, and that'll show the chunk borders. So I can use any sort of explosive. I can use regular TNT or one of the new blocks added by the mod. So if I go ahead and explode this, and if I take out the handheld seismometer, we'll see that there's 0 buckets of oil in this chunk. So let's move on to the next chunk and repeat. And we'll do this until we find some oil. Alright, so finally we found a chunk that has 35 buckets of oil. So what we can do is we can put down our pump jack. So the pump jack isn't just going to start pumping oil on its own. You have to actually give it power. So I'm going to put a cogwheel here. We're going to need a pump to store our oil in this fluid tank. So I'll go ahead and power this with the creative motor and we can watch it start to pump. Here's a setup I made to pump and refine oil. So of course we have our pump jack and our fluid container, and then that goes into a distillation column. So what's going on here? Well, if we search for methane, which is one of the products of oil refinement, we can see how it works. So here we have our distillation tower, which of course requires crude oil as an input and has to be powered by a blaze burner. So at the bottom level we get molten sulfur because that's the heaviest, and then we get mixed xylene. So you have 4 different compounds in one area, so you're going to have to separate those out later. Then you have toluene, benzene, and then you have LPG, which is another mix of multiple compounds all in one area. So I don't know what all of these do, and I haven't figured out how to separate out the LPGs, but I have figured out how to separate the mixed xylenes. So let's have a look at the whole process. Alright, so as that puff of smoke rises up, we're going to see the values in here start to increase. So right now, for example, our mixed xylenes are at 696. Next time that goes up, we're going to see that number increase. So there you go, it's gone up to 720. So it's going to do that for every level of the distillation tower. So I'm going to go ahead and shut this off right now so we don't use up all of our oil. So like we saw in the ponder menu, the lowest level is sulfur. Then we have the mixed xylenes, then the toluene, the benzene, and then the LPG, which is a mixture of 4 different compounds. So we don't have to do anything with the compounds that are already separated out, but how do we separate out the mixed xylenes? Well, we do that using the centrifuge. So the centrifuge is here, and let's have a look at it. So what a centrifuge does is it separates out the more dense and the less dense materials together. So since there's 4 different compounds, what it's going to do is each half of the more dense and less dense are each going to contain 2 different compounds. So we're going to have to separate each item out twice. We're going to have to divide 4 by 2 and then 2 by 2 to get our isolated compounds. So the result of the centrifuge process is that the least dense materials will go out the bottom. So at the bottom we have a mixture of ethylbenzene and O-xylene. And then the denser compounds are M-xylene and P-xylene. And then here I've separated those out again, and we have an impure ethylbenzene and an O-xylene. So just now I tried to further refine my impure ethylbenzene. I tried both the centrifuge method as well as the distillation method, but in both cases I still had impure ethylbenzene. So either there's no way to do this, or maybe I just don't know how. Maybe it uses the vat or some other method that I'm not aware of. For the LPG, I wasn't able to separate them out. So anytime I tried to use the centrifuge, I just ended up with mixture and something else called supersaturated mixture. And I wasn't able to further separate anything out from here. So maybe they're not meant to be separated, or maybe it requires another method to separate them. So that's everything that I've had a chance to experiment with so far. This mod is really interesting, and it definitely sparked my curiosity in chemistry, which surprised me because chemistry was never my favorite subject. I always found it dry and compared to physics very unintuitive. I now realize that what was missing was being able to play around and experiment. Maybe if I had just been left alone in a room full of chemicals and lab equipment, I would have acquired a greater interest in the subject. Thank you for watching.